All right. As previously mentioned, we're going to be going over RESTful API design. And I just want to make sure that we cover what we're going to be going over and that we actually go a little bit into what we have. So far, we have a full stack application that we built out yesterday where we have a user and that user is able to do different things such as log in, log out, and do other type of activity. We have our user authentication set up. So user is able to sign up. We already have a user, so let's just sign him in. If we go, oh, actually, I'm currently logged in, so logged out. And now I'm logged in. So that's my user authentication. It's working properly. I have a little bit of a React router working, and it looks like I'm using hash router to be able to do this project. So this is great. As far as our models and our URLs go, well, we see our URLs are designed this way. And we have a couple of verbs inside of our URLs, and we also have this index page that doesn't have anything. So let's talk a little bit about RESTful APIs. So first, what is a RESTful API? Well, a RESTful API design is basically just best practices that go into REST. And REST actually stands for representational state transfer. So it's just an API that follows the following standards. So let's pull up the README and ensure that we copy them over. So the following standard is it utilizes JSON responses or just JSON in general for both taking in request and responses. Okay. It utilizes nouns instead of verbs. For API endpoints. And it utilizes error handling to ensure that if there is an error, we handle it in the backend. It does this thing called name collection. And we'll go a little bit into what that means as we go through this class. Okay, so those are the I would argue most important parts of RESTful API design. There's a lot more to go over, but these are the points that we're going to focus on today. Okay, great. So currently we have this API that we already built, and if we go to our views, we're utilizing JSON responses. We have nothing but JSON responses everywhere, and I just want to clarify, is this a good font size for everyone, or should I make it a little bigger?
It works for me.
Awesome. Okay, great. So now we see this JSON responses, we see a little bit of error handling. Now this is great and all, but we do have all of these views happening within different functions, and they're all being triggered by this type of API, right? Where our URL patterns they're using verbs, they're not using nouns. So let's try to fix that and refactor our code a little bit. So knowing that I have this, I already have a user, right? If I go to my model, or sorry, my URLs on my project, we will see that I already have a user endpoint. So let's try to specify that. Let's see. Let's clean this up. Okay. So let's bring a new path and let's name it users. So by naming it users, we're grouping the possibility that we could have an API endpoint that will then take an ID on the next row. And then this way, we're not just recycling the API, we're opening it up for collection. So that's what it means by when it says, pull it up one more time for name collection. Instead of having user and then on the next one, or users, and then on the next line, have a user/ID, I just say users altogether by pluralizing it. And then that lets me know that I could also take in an ID and I would still trigger the same behavior. And now I go to views dot user capabilities. Then I move over to the name and I name it user capabilities. So I have this app. This app currently doesn't do anything and it doesn't work. And it tells me here, hey, there's no such thing as user capabilities that's been invented yet. So let's move on to views. Let's try to organize this a little better. So now when we move on to our views, we can still use our API decorator. But instead of just taking in post request, I want all operations that can happen with a user to happen within here. So let's see, we have a get, we have a post, and seems like we have multiple posts. So maybe we should include a put for sign in and a post for login. So for sign up. So let's do post, a put, and we want a get request. So now let's work through this information. So we have our function, which is user capabilities, going to take in a request. And after it takes in a request, well, now we just handle the different types of requests that we could receive. So let's say if request dot method is equal to post, then I want the following actions to happen. And let me make sure this is indented properly. Still have access to the request. It's going incorrectly, grabbing everything that I needed from the request.data. And maybe here I could also ask and request.user is not authenticated. Let me make sure how we do that here later on. Here we go. Is authenticated. Or for now, let's just keep it the way we have it. Okay. So now if it receives a post request, it knows that it's supposed to sign a user up. Let's move on to if the request.method is a put request. And this should actually be an elif. Why are you angry? Are you just angry because there's nothing in there? Try accept. Okay, it is angry just because there's nothing in there. All right, so if I have a put request, that means I want my user to be able to log in. So let's grab this functionality. Again, I want to make sure everything's indented properly. So now I'm taking a put request to be able to sign a user in. Now I want a get request to be able to get a current user. And in this get request, again, I'm just going to grab this information. Okay, so I grab the get, it gets me my information. But the last thing that I need to be able to handle is how to log out. Well, log out is also a post function. So maybe I should say, hey, if the user is authenticated, I could probably put that here. So I could say if request dot user dot is, and let me make sure I have that syntax. Authenticated from down here. So we want is underscore authenticated. That's going to come back either true or false. Well, if it is authenticated, then I want it to be able to sign out. Otherwise, then I want the following to happen. So I'll just go ahead and indent that and grab my sign out function. No, that's not right. Indent that one more time. Exception is E. Why are you angry?
Your try is off by 1 space.
Thank you. There it is. Okay, so now it's going to take in the request. It's going to ask, hey, is the user authenticated? If it is, then we're going to sign him out. If he's not, and I'm taking in a post request, well, then let's sign him up. If I send a put method, it's going to sign in said user. And if I send a request, it's going to get me the information of my user. And it's all within the same view. And let's move on to our URL. So we still have our URLs. Now we have one URL that's handling all of our user capabilities. Right. And the way I like to think about it is just someone kept drilling to me when I was first learning this was the single responsibility principle. And it's if I have a path that's named users, well, everything a user, everything a user should be able to do should be inside one view. And inside of this one view, I should have smaller functions inside of them trying to accomplish what belongs to each one of them, which will go into that part of the refactoring process afterwards. But as of now, we haven't tested out our API. So we could either use Postman or we could try using our project. For the sake of getting some practice with React, we're going to use our project. So let's just change our endpoints a little bit. We need our URLs. We will need the README. Let's see. And I believe everything that we have should be under our utilities.jsx. Okay. So instead of doing this for sign up, well, I wanted to just go to users. We'll see that everything rebuilt. My server's still running. So let's try using that function. So let's say, oh, that was my name. Hello. Well, I send the form and we see this post users and we get a not found. So there's something going on here. And let's try to figure out what is happening. So it goes on to user, which is our root URL, but we want it to also touch users. And okay, perfect. And so now let's try to send that again. And let me log out real quick. Okay. So now we see Francisco, and we want av@av.com. Okay, so that post request was sent and it was successful. We see this 200 and it went to user/users. Okay, great. So now let's go to our login. Let's switch that up for users as well. And let's click on login. Let's refresh our page. And let's say av@av.com and av. Okay, so there was a problem with this one. So this should be sending a put request to be able to log us in, but it's looking for name. I see. So look at the type of request that we're sending. We're still sending a post, and I forgot to change it to a put. So let me refresh this and try that again. So av@av.com, av, we send it, and now I have my user signed in to my new URL endpoint. Now my current user, let's say I want to change that as well. I don't need to change the method because it's also expecting a get request. So I go to refresh it. Everything works correctly. My use effect is pulling my correct user. And then last, I got my logout function that will create my users. I am currently authenticated. So when I click on logout, I get a post request that logs me out. And if I refresh the page, we see that nothing's updated because my get request can't authenticate a user, so it continues to return none. And just like that, we refactored our endpoints so that we no longer need all three of these endpoints. Now it's just going straight to our users. It's more clear as far as our API design. And as we mess around with APIs, we'll notice that they have this type of tendency of using just one noun, maybe pluralized if you have the capability to grab one or more. And then that way, everything does when it comes to passing someone your endpoint documentation becomes a lot simpler as to what they can and cannot do. And let me make sure we're good. Okay, we're really good on time. Before I continue moving forward, is there any questions? Okay, pretty simple so far. So
I do have a question. I was having trouble hitting the mute button.
oh, okay.
Would you eventually have more than one view file, like a login py file, and then start breaking up the views so you don't have a giant views.py file?
Yes, so that's actually the next word that I was going to go into. Just like we have a utilities.jsx up here, we could have a utilities.py where we could grab some of this information and start putting it inside that utilities file. But notice this application, we named it user app, meaning that this user app application is only supposed to hold things that belong to the user, and that's it. We don't want to add anything extra in there because each app is supposed to do one thing and it's supposed to do it really well. So let's say that in the end, so the overall purpose of this app is to be a task managing app, meaning that it's a to-do list, right? Currently, I have a user app that will hold anything that has to do with users, but then eventually I would create another app that would manage tasks. It'll have the task model, it'll create relationships with each user, and it'll have the views corresponding to the task. But you want to keep things separate and clean. And just like you mentioned, this is a ridiculous looking view. So what we're going to do is we're going to refactor it and start cutting it up into chunks by making a utilities.py. Does that answer your question?
Yep, sure did. Thanks.
Of course. Is the utilities folder for just for organization? No, you could create a utilities folder, and then inside that utilities folder, you could have individual view files for each one of them. But as far as what purpose does the utilities folder actually serve? Yes, it's plainly for organization, to be able to divide all of your information and put it into separate files inside of your utilities folder. Does that answer your question, Leo? Okay. So I was about the same thing. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so now we have this information. Let's go ahead and try to refactor a little bit more. So we know we don't need this, but I don't really want to erase it. So let's just comment it out. Oh, we need that still. Okay, so we commented out, our server rebuilds, none of our functionality should be hurt. Let's try to log in just to make sure. Okay, logs in, everything has changed, everything's within one view. But now let's start breaking things up. So something as simple as this that needs direct access to the request, we're gonna keep. But as far as everything else, well, now we can start breaking things up and switching it. So let's create a utilities file. And let me just close all this noise that we have right here on the left side. We'll create a utilities file, and then we'll create something for sign up. Oh, was there a question? Awesome. So we have our utilities.py. We know that we're going to want to import app users from models. So from .models, import app users. Okay, that's pretty much all we'll need. And now let's grab this user authentication function and copy it over. Yeah. See, how do we do this? So let's grab all of this, come over, and let's do EF sign, or yes, sign up. It's going to take in a couple of arguments, or actually we'll just take in a data. And what this is going to do, oh, hello, Python, thank you. And what this is going to do is it's going to handle my ability to sign up. No longer takes in a request. So I can erase all that. And everything else should be working properly. All right, takes
Yeah,
in a
request that data in your email field first, line 5.
Thank you. I was testing you guys. Keep. How do you delete tabs on multiple lines like that? What do you mean by that?
Like you highlighted like the block of code, and then like I don't know, I always have trouble because I go line by line deleting the space after I copy paste something.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, so you highlight whatever code it is that is repetitive, and then you'll see that Visual Studio will recognize all the other repetitive instances of that. And you just hold down Command D if you're on a Mac, and if you're on a Windows, it's Control D. D as in Delta. Then you just continue to click it, and the more you click it, the more of them they'll pick up. Okay, so we have our.
Just be careful when you do that, because the first couple times it will keep the cursor on all of those lines at the same time. So once you delete whatever it is you wanted to do and you start typing something new, it's going to start typing it in like 10 different places.
Yeah, you got to make sure to escape it. All right, so now we have our users, we're able to create our stuff. We currently are trying to return a JSON response, but we don't have access to that. So let's import that. Okay, and now let's move on to our views. And in our views, we're just going to simply comment this out. And we're going to return sign up. And what we're going to pass into this is going to be the dictionary of request.data. And now we just need to import sign up because we have it here in our utilities, but we don't have it here. So let's say from utilities import sign up. So now it's recognizing everything properly. Let's rebuild our project, move over to sign up, and let's try creating a new user. So let's say okay, so we see that that new user was created and everything happened the way it was supposed to through our utilities. Now everything's divided. This looks a lot cleaner. I no longer need this information to be stored inside of the same application or inside of the same file. Okay, logout's a really small function. There's no need to refactor that. Let's move into our pull request. So this right here is going to take the sign in or login, because I'm not trying to start singing for everyone. The login is going to take in the data. And then in that data, well, we're just going to pass the following. It's actually going to need the entire request. So let's just pass in the request overall, because we want to be able to access it later on. Okay, so now let's grab this. Oh. All right, so now we have the email password. We have all of the information. The only difference is that we separated the logic and sent it into a request. So now let's try to call that function in. We have sign up. Let's grab login. And we're just going to return login. And it's going to take in the request. Great. So now let's refresh our code, go over to the login page. Let's try to sign them in. So now we get an error and authentication. User, oh, that's important. I probably want to import all of my Django stuff for serial for grabbing a user. So let's grab that and bring that into utilities. Okay, let's try this again. We'll refresh our page. Send in the login. The put request came through. The pull request came through, but they didn't seem to log us in. So my get is still trying to get the current user. And it seems there's no one in the current user field. So let's try to see what our response is. I'm gonna try to send the same information to try to get an error. Okay, so we see a put request that goes to HTTP, goes to status 200. So everything seems to be working correctly. And if I go to refresh, it's not grabbing my user. So let's just make sure that it worked correctly. Okay, so I'm telling it to print user if it did work correctly, and it's not returning anything, which means there was some sort of error. So let's try to print here. Not working. Okay, so we see that it goes straight into not working. So it hits this if statement. It's not something that it can do. So it goes on to the next one. So let's see, user is not none, which means that user is coming back as none. So let's print the user so that we can check it. Okay, so we see it's coming back as none. So it's authenticating, coming back as none. Let's try to get the email and password. Let's see if it's even able to grab that. Okay, so it is able to grab the correct information. So maybe I just did something different for the user. So let's see, let's try one of the users that we've already created. Let's go to login, go to av@av.com and then do av. Okay, so that one worked properly. So I was just passing in the wrong credentials and that's why it wasn't working. I apologize, everyone. Okay, so now we have our login function working, we have our sign up function working, and we've extrapolated all the information from our views. Okay, and the last thing that I need is my get request, which will just get me my current user. And it looks like it needs access to the request as well. So let's just do that real quick. Okay, so what is the point of moving all this mess to the utilities file again? So the point of moving everything to the utilities file, it's quite literally just to make things look nice. It makes things look nice. It makes your API more readable so that when somebody comes and looks at your documentation, instead of just saying, hey, user capabilities, well, now I know which type of request is supposed to trigger what type of behavior. I know that a post request, if the user is authenticated, is supposed to log him out. Otherwise, it's signing him up. I know that a put request is logging him in, and soon I'll know that a get request will return. So the rest is more for the individuals that are pinging your API. This is more on the developer side of making it nice for the REST complexities. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. So now let's go into the get and let's create our get current user. It's going to take in a request, and then it's going to do all of the following. Okay, and let's return that. And let's comment this out to ensure it's working properly. Okay, so my get current user is not working. That's because I don't have serializer. So let's bring that in. Not trying to rewrite all of that. So let's figure this out. There you go. Okay, so now it's failing because I don't have JSON. And now it's working correctly. So now that I have all the libraries that it needs, my API is working correctly, and it's all working from a nice and simple, easy to read view. Okay, so now I can start getting rid of some information because I no longer need it. Great. So now we officially just cleaned up our project. And it's looking a lot better, a lot nicer when I go look at my views. I can look at my URLs. Well, now I don't need all of this stuff in my URLs path. I can just see my users, the capabilities. I can go to utilities and look at all of this. Oh, sorry, no utilities. Look at views and see the behavior that it's supposed to have upon each independent request. So before we keep moving, let's check on the chat. Okay, perfect.
I have a question.
Yes, of course.
When you're developing, would you kind of take these same steps where you have everything kind of spread out in the views and then eventually refactor like this, or would you try to start with what we just did?
So a lot of people, I guess that's a very opinionated question. In my opinion, I would put it all in one file just because it helps with debugging as I'm developing. I can see everything in one file. I don't have to continue opening up different files and try to pull the thread to figure out where the error is coming from. And then once I have it working all in one file, then I could start refactoring and putting everything in different utility files that live inside of a utilities folder. And then from there, it's going to be easier to debug and make sure that you keep it nice and clean. So in my opinion, I would build it ugly first. Once it's good and working, make sure you have enough time to refactor it and make it look nice. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thanks.
Perfect. Okay. So now we have this working. We're sending the index, but I don't think we want to send our index inside of this application anymore if we're going to go ahead and end up moving it somewhere else. So let's see. Maybe when I go to my models or my URL paths, my actual project, maybe I want to put that function somewhere in here, right? Or maybe I do want to keep it in there and just render it strictly for the users. There's a couple of different ways to go about this. But let's go into creating our next app, and then we'll handle that issue afterwards. So actually, we made some pretty good time, and we kind of flew through that. So let's take a good little 15-minute break, and then after those 15 minutes, we'll come back and pick up our task application. Awesome. Let me pause the record. All right, everyone. So this is where we left off. We have our user login and sign out function working correctly. So now let's start developing our actual ability to see some tasks. So let's work a little bit on the React side, and then we'll work from React backwards. So let's create another, let's see, we have our SRC, and here are some components. So let's create a component for tasks. And here, let's grab the task. And let's export it. And I just want to return a. Say again. Here we'll have a tasks.map. We'll call individual task. And when I call this individual task, I'm just going to go ahead. Failure. Okay, so when I call this individual task, I'm going to go ahead and map through it. And as I'm mapping through it, I'm going to call an li of task.title. Okay. So this is working great. This is red squiggly because this needs to be as such. And these are actually not supposed to be curly brackets, but rather parentheses. Okay, let's see. What don't you like about this? Task.map. Is it the fact that you don't know what task is? Okay, so let's clarify tasks. Let's make that into a const, and let's make that into use loader data. And now let's import that from React Router DOM. Okay, so let's see, OL, we have our OL, then we try to map through that OL. And we're saying task.map. I'm wondering what I'm doing wrong here.
You need another close parentheses on line 8, I think.
Line 8. A close parentheses?
On, oh, now line 9.
Okay,
So you have 2 opens on 7.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we have this function that's going to grab a use loader data and create all of our stuff. But maybe I should have a form to even just be able to create any data. So let's grab that. Okay, there you go. Okay, let's bring in the form. And in this form, we want an input field of, we know that's going to be type text, but let's just make it a placeholder of task title. And this could actually be spread out because it's just a placeholder. Okay, and then let's give it the ability to submit itself. So input type submit. Okay, this is working well. Let's throw it into our router and let's establish what our use loaded data function will be. So let's go into the router. We have our login. Let's create our new one. So now we have path. Make this into tasks. Let's create our element. And this is freaking out because of that. Okay, and our element is going to bring in our task component. And let me just make sure that's what I called it. Yes, that is. Okay, brings in our task component, and now we have a loader. And this loader is going to be getTasks. Okay, so now getTasks needs to come in from our utilities, but it currently doesn't exist. So let's create getTasks real quick. It's going to be an asynchronous function. It's not going to take in anything. And it's going to say again. Okay, so then we'll go into, oh, probably want the const there. We're going to grab the response. And once we grab our response, we're going to return response.data.tasks. Okay, so now we can go into our router, bring that in. From our utilities, goes to get tasks. Okay, so that should be working properly. The last thing that I will need to do is come over to our actual navbar and create that link. Okay, let me go over here and I'm actually going to give an H1 component so that I can say tasks. Okay. So that concludes that. Everything's rebuilding. I go to refresh. We see task populated. When I click on it, I get an unexpected error. So let's see what's going on here. Oh, so it's telling me, hey, this failed. This Axios request is not working properly. You did something wrong, which is what we expected because currently my utilities isn't connected to my URLs. All right, so let's create a new app. So let's Control-C and then OS. Click on match PY, start app, and let's do tasks. So now we see we have our task app. Our task app can have URLs if we wanted it to. In this case, I'm just going to move on to our regular URLs endpoint, and I'm going to add tasks. Not from user. We don't need user anymore. I don't need the views from user anymore. I can go into my manager, go into the URLs, and then I can say path. And actually, let's go into tasks. And let's have that include. I think it's task app. I think that's what I would name it. Yes, task app URLs. Okay, so it includes my task app.urls. I can come up here, create a new file, urls.py, import it from Django.urls. And then I can establish my URL patterns. Then I want my path of an empty string to call views.task handler. And it's going to have a name of tasks. So now let's import views. Oh, and actually it's in this file, import views. Okay, so now we import views, and now I can actually move over and start creating the views for this response. So let's do, or actually let's create the model. So let's create the model first. So class task, that's going to be a models.model. And it's going to have a title. It's going to be a max length of 250. It's going to be unique. It can't be blank. And it can't be null. Okay. I'm also going to need my app user from my other application. So let's say from, I think it goes back one like this. Okay. Then it's going to go into my user app. It's going to go into the models. And it's going to import. What do I want to import from my user app user? Okay. And then I want user to be equal to a foreign key. So that to portion is going to be to my app user. And then on delete, we want models.cascade. And we don't even need this stuff. Okay, so we have models.cascade. This creates our new model. And now let's go to our view and actually create that view. So we want to use JSON responses. We want to use Django REST frameworks. Views, import. Is it dot decorators? No, it's dot views, dot decorators, right? Okay, I'm gonna go check the other one real quick. REST framework.decorators. Yeah, I was right. Okay. Okay, so now we have our API view from REST frameworks, and let's go into creating our API. So now we have our @API view. This is going to take in a post and a GET request for now, because all we want it to be able to do is create and get all my requests. And let's create our function. So we have def task handler. It's going to take in the request. And what this is going to do is if request.method is equal to post, well, then I wanted to create a new one. So let's, probably want to import my models. So from models, import task. Okay, so I have title, which is going to be inside my body. So, and then once we grab it from the body, then I could create my new task. So let's say new task is going to be equal to task dot objects create. Is there a question? Okay, and by this point, my user will be authenticated, so I can have it being sent back to request.user, because I want to make sure that this only happens if a user is authenticated. Okay, awesome. So now I created it. Now let's save it. And let's return a JSON response of success. Let's make that true. Okay, so now elif request.method is equal to get. Well, then all I want to do is I want to grab all my tasks. Dot all. I want to turn this into a list. So let me work through that real quick. Dot values. I actually don't want to grab all of them because I only want the ones that belong to the specific user. So let's say where user is equal to request.user. Is there a question?
I think someone has a hot mic on.
Awesome. So let's return tasks and let's make that tasks, which should be a list of objects. This is all great, but we currently don't have our try and except blocks to handle for any type of errors. So let's do that real quick. So now we have try. And I want to return the similar response. But instead of true, I want to return false. Okay. And again, we want a try. And we don't want this to necessarily return false, but we don't want our program to fail, but we do want it to kind of stay inside the same list. So let's do exception as E, print E, and then let's return our JSON response, but instead of returning tasks, we'll just return an empty list. And I have an extra R here. Okay. Awesome. So now I got my get request, I got my post request, I'm handling for errors. And let me make sure that my URLs are connected. So let's go to my task manager. It sends it to tasks and it includes the task app URLs. At the task app URLs, it grabs the task handler. And then once it grabs the task handler, it goes into my views. And for the task handler, since we're getting a get request, it's going to grab all of the instances created for our user. Currently, our user is new, doesn't have anything. So let's load this information and try to run the server and see if we get any errors, which hopefully we don't. Python manage py, make migrations. Okay. Attempted relative import beyond top level packages. That is correct. Tasks include okay, so this is happening in my URLs. Oh no, it's happening from my views. Import task. From dot import views. Okay, so then it goes into my views, and on line 4, it says that that's what's creating the problem. So let's take a look at line 4. It imports the tasks. And well, it's called task. Okay. So maybe this is what's creating the problem. Yep, line 2 from user import. Tentative of imports from top level packages. Interesting. I wonder how I could do that then. Let's see. Okay, so it looks like there's a different method for doing it. Okay. But I did mess up in the fact that I needed to include it in my installed apps in my settings. So let's go to my settings and let's bring that in real quick where we have our task app. And hopefully that will do the trick for us, but more than likely it won't. Yep, it doesn't. So it looks like we have to use this different type of method where we import all of the apps and then try to get that information. So let's do it real quick. It looks like they have from Django .apps, and then I want to import apps. And now I want here. I want app user to be equal to apps.getModel. And the model that I want to get is app user. Okay, let's see what that does for us. Okay, so models aren't loaded into the app registry. Let's see. That may be something to do here. Let's see. Oh, you're saying to try to migrate? I don't think it's gonna let me migrate, but I can try it. Oh, that was not the correct one. Yeah, it's gonna tell me something about the app registry. Let's see, Django.core exceptions. Okay, so let's see what this does. Okay, so it's saying that there might be a problem with the way I'm trying to load this. So let me try to comment this out. Let me try making migrations. Okay, if I do it this way, cannot import task from views, which is fair. Let's see, where is my views? And let's comment, well, technically none of this would need it. Okay. Well, it doesn't say where he runs them, so let's try to run them here. Okay, so now populate isn't. um. Oh, so I have to say get user model. Okay. So get user model. Just try to comment that out. So now get user auto apps. Object has no attribute get user model that you mean register model. Oh, so maybe I have to register it on the other side. So let's see. I apologize, everyone. Let me try to figure this out. I'll make sure that it gets annotated on our notes so that it doesn't run into any problems later. So let's see, we want import Django, and I think it was Django.apps. Django.apps. Okay, and now we want app dot register. Model, and we want to pass the app user model.
Should be apps with an S17.
Thank you. Okay, then we go over to the other one. Oh boy, let me close all of this up so that we don't keep getting all this noise. Okay, so now register model missing one position of argument of model. Okay. See, it takes in the app label and the model type. Okay. So then model equals abstract user. Okay, so that worked. And now if I move over here and I uncomment this and that and this, let's try to make migrations again. Okay, so now it's saying populate isn't something, so maybe from that. Okay, so apps object has no attribute get user model. That you mean register model? No, so now I just want you to get my model. Right click on the current open tab in VS Code, you can close others. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Okay, so it's still telling me that the app registry, that the models aren't loaded, but I am registering the model. So I wonder, is this where the Django setup comes in? Let's bring that back. Okay, runtime error, populate isn't reentrant. I don't know what that means. Okay, let's see. Oh, so this is the same one that I had already read. Let's see from. Oh, well, that might be important. Oh, never mind. So this is saying that this works. I see. I'm calling it incorrectly. So when I go to grab the foreign key, I want this to be app1 dot app user. Okay. Let's see. Oh, that's right. I gotta take that off. Okay, so Django core exceptions registry models aren't loaded. Okay, so now we're back to the same one. Django models aren't loaded yet. Oh, this is getting in deep. So I'm saying if it's ready, then to grab this model. I may have to do a little bit of more research on this one, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move all of our logic to our original user app, and then we'll move from there. I apologize, everyone. As soon as I get this figured out, I'll get that information to you. Let me see. Your current directory for Django Platoon is not directory. So you're saying that I should be able to do from user app dot models import app user. Yeah, I wonder if this will do the trick. Let's see, one last attempt. Oh, wow, that actually did it. Okay. Now I feel like a goofball. All right, well, that's how you do it. You so just to clarify, whenever you import something from another from another app, you have to specify the app and then the models. You don't have to route it as if it was a regular Python module. That was my bad, so I apologize. And now it's asking us to provide a default. So, and it's asking us to provide a default because I did migrations earlier before having this figured out. But now that I have a default, this should be able to do the trick for us. Awesome. So now we have our migrations and now we can run server. Who is that with the save? Thank you so much. That was Daniel. Ooh, nice. I owe you one. Let's see. So Python match py. Now we can migrate. And hopefully the migrate works. All right, the migration worked. And now we can run our server. Okay, so now our server's running. Let me make sure that I'm messing anything up in our views. Okay, everything's working in our views. We could close all this shenanigans. Go back, refresh. Okay, so now let's take a look at React and how it connects to our application. So in React, when I go ahead and go to my tasks, I'm gonna trigger this getTasks function. This getTask function is from my utilities file, and then it will get the information at tasks. When I move down to task manager, if I go to URLs, we see tasks here. So that will then send me over to my task app. Is that the same hot mic? I'm just gonna go ahead and mute them. Okay, perfect. And then after that, it sends me to my task app URLs. So now I can go up to my task app, go into my URLs. It triggers my views, the handler of the task handler. So now I go to views, gets my task handler, goes into the get method, and it tries to pull anything that belongs to this specific user. So if everything works well, when we go to tasks, well, we see a form, but we don't see anything populating under it because I currently don't have a tasks. Okay, so now we figured that out. And now that we have figured that out, let's try to figure out how to actually run this title, right? So now we have tasks. Well, I want to sign in somebody, or I want to create a new task. So let's go over and again, work from the back to the front. We're going to come over to task.jsx. We have this, but we need to be able to track the value. So we'll just make a couple of use states. So const new task. And we'll make that equal to a use state of an empty string. And then we'll add those to our input field. So we'll make the value of new task and create the onChange method to take in an event. And that event will then set new task to event.target.value. Okay, so we'll clean that up. Now it looks like this. I refresh it, nothing's broken. The last thing that I need to do is actually create an onSubmit method. So let's build this utility for making a new task. So I want to create task. It's going to be an asynchronous function. And we'll send it to the response. Okay, so we'll send axios.post. It'll go to tasks. And what it will have in the body will be a title, which will be title. And let's actually bring that in, because we're going to know we're going to need it. And then let's say return response.data.tasks. Okay. So now we go here and what we want here. Oh, hello, what happened there? So set new task. We're going to create an onSubmit function that will trigger this and then use it to render all of our tasks. So currently task is just a list and we have it as a const. But maybe what we want is a use state as well in here. We want to set current tasks. And we'll make that equal to a use state, where we will initialize it as tasks from our loader data. So now we could just switch this for current tasks. Okay, so now we send that. Our response comes back. Maybe we should pass in the set current tasks in here. And what we could do instead of returning anything, actually I stand corrected. So let's send that. And now in here, we could create a separate function that will handle it. So let's do const get my tasks. This is going to also be an asynchronous function because I'll be pinging Axios. And now we could just set current tasks to await. We want to await create task. And what we're going to pass into create task is the new task value. So now we have that. Does this title key in the dictionary you're passing in your utilities file need to be in quotes? So no, so the key itself is title, and then the value is the title of the parameter that I'm passing in. Does that make sense, Dave? Or is there something else that you're pointing at?
You should have always seen that the keys be in quotes.
Oh, yeah, I could put it in quotes.
I don't know if it mattered or not.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so now we have our tasks. And on this form, well, now I just want the onSubmit method to take in an event. And then the first thing that I want is I want to prevent the default behavior. And then I want to get my tasks. Okay. Have all of that information. Utilities is connected. It goes to create task, sends the response. It goes to task, which then goes to my utilities, which then sends it to my views. And in my views, I see that I'm taking in a post request. So it's going to go here. And maybe instead of returning this, what I want to return is all of the tasks. And I'm actually going to make this global. What was it? Was it option? Yeah, it was. Thank you for showing me that, Dave. I appreciate it. And then that will be tasks as well. And it will return tasks. So even if it's successful or it fails, it's still going to return a list of all tasks. I'm actually going to have to add that here. So the reasoning why I'm adding this here is because once I create a new task, I need to requery the database to grab all of the values. Because if I just do it here, it's going to come back with the prior values before I created a new task. So let's see. Let's put code better. And let's see what it does. Okay, so now we have code better populated. But we know that I have to also set my new task string back to an empty string. Yeah, so if we take off the prevent.default and I try to submit something, it's going to try to send a request to the current URL that we're in. And since we're using hash router, that's not what we want. But now I can create other things. So create other things. And we see it populate. Everything still works properly. And then the bigger part, if I go to sign up and I log out, I go to task, well, now task is empty. And if I try to create a new task, well, we're going to see that in Python, it's going to tell me, hey, the ID, try to send an anonymous field user. That's not right. I don't want an anonymous field user. You need to sign up. So I could log in again. If I remember my password, my information. Okay, so now I go back to tasks. We see all my old prior tasks. I can refresh it and I'll still be able to see all my stuff. Awesome. And that is it for RESTful API. I know I kind of took off in the debugging process. So let me just do a real quick recap over what I did once we were able to fix that bug. So, oh, we got some questions. Is there any questions that I could maybe address real quick?
Yeah, I have a question. So did you have to create a new database for the task, or the task, when you create the new task, it will save the same database as the user at just different table?
Yeah, it's the same database as the user, it's just in a different table.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, PSQL, and then I think it was task manager. Okay. So here we see the app of the task app, and then we see the user as well. All right, so then I can say select all from task app, task, and it shows me all of the tasks. And I could also say select all app users. And it will show me all of the app users. All right, because in our, they're both apps that belong to our project, and our project, which is the task manager, is what establishes our settings and tells us which database we're going to be using throughout the duration of this project. So now I created 2 applications. They're all working with React. Everything's working together. But something that I'm really not liking is that when I go to my empty string, I have to go to user to be able to render my application. So let me fix that real quick. And then I'll go over the recap. So now we have our user app. Where did you go? There it is. Yeah, and our user app is what renders our index. So let's copy that for now. And let's go over to our URLs. Let's just put that in there. And let's import HTTP response. Okay, so now we have our HTTP response. And now we could do a path of an empty string. And then we can say send the index. Put in our little comma afterwards. Okay, so now instead of going to user, I can go to the index And let me make sure everything's running here. Okay, so now I could go to the index and it will still render my application. So I could remove that logic from here. So let's comment it out so that we could see it. And let me open up the app URL so I could comment that endpoint as well. Okay, so now we see that my function is or that my app lives at my root. I can refresh it. Everything's working well. If I go to log in, I can log in and that's working. I can see my tasks belonging to this user and I can still send it new information. And I can also log out. And upon logging out, we don't have the logic for log out to create this to refresh. We could do that on our, but that just takes a pretty simple amount of logic. And then after that, if I go back to my application or refresh it, we see that everything still works properly. We're just living in the root now instead of having to live within the user URL. Awesome. So that concludes our class. And just to do a real quick recap that I promised. Oh, was there a question? Before any of this, did we have to pip install Django REST frameworks? Yes, we had Django REST frameworks from the lesson when we went over the, I think it was the authentication lesson. Okay, so now let me go real quick. So we have our project. Our project handles everything that's common to all of our applications. It has our secret key, has both applications that we'll be utilizing, specifies the database that will be utilized by both applications or any apps living within this project. We have the base directory where we'll be reading our React project. And then we have to specify where it is that I'm telling where I'm telling my project to use in auth user model. So that takes care of our settings. Let's move into URLs. In the URLs, I have this path, which is an empty path, and it will go into send the index. And send the index will open up my static folder, grab the index inside of static. Oof. Let me try to clean that up. I will grab the index inside of static and render my React project. That's great. Admin, we already know what admin does. If I go to my user endpoints, well, I'm telling it to include users. So now when I go to my URLs for user, I actually don't any longer need this users. I can make this an empty path, but I'm going to keep it there because it's what's actually making our program function. If I try to switch it now, I would have to go in utilities and switch it as well. Okay, so now in our user function, we see that it goes into user capabilities, which happens to be inside of our views. So now we could go into our views, see our user function. It's been cleaned up. So we have if request method is post and the user is authenticated. Then I want to log out said user. If the user is not authenticated, I'm going to run the sign up function, which comes in from my utilities, which handles all of our in-depth, kind of dirtier looking code. And then it handles my elif for login, if it's a put request, and my get method for getting my current user. So that takes care of my utilities and my user application. Does anyone have any questions up to the user app point? Okay, so now it goes into the path of tasks, where it creates it, where it goes into the task app, looks at my URLs. I'm telling it at an empty indices to go into my task handler. So now I could go into my views and we can see that in my task handler, I could either receive post or get request. In both type of requests, I'm still returning the list. So I could probably refactor this so that there's one try and one accept block for the entire body of this task manager, since we have some repeated responses. But if it receives a post, it's going to grab the title, and then it's going to create a new title or a new task that correlates with the task model. Once it creates that new task, it's then going to return all of the tasks belonging to this one user. If it's a GET request, it just returns all of the tasks belonging to this one user. And if there's an error, it'll return an empty path. Shortcuts, task, okay. So that takes care of our Django side. And now if we go take a look at our utilities, which is where all of our logic lives, we see that it's pinging each API endpoint on its own. And here are the routes that it's taking in order to create all of our new content. As far as the task goes, so we have our getTasks, which just gets all of our tasks that belong to the one user. And this is our loader data. And let me pull up our router so that we can see that as our loader data. And then when I create a new task, I send a post request and I return all of the tasks belonging to this one user, so that in my task component, I can then set current tasks to all of the tasks being pulled from my database. And that is the summary over what we've gone over today. We've cleaned up our URL paths and we've created different applications, each to handle one single responsibility, because each app should do one thing and it should do it well. All right, is there any questions over anything that we've covered thus far? I know that was a lot.
Yeah, I got one. I think it's a dumb question, but I'm gonna fire it off. On utilities, on .jsx. So those Axios calls are being sent to the endpoints that we set up on our back end, the front end,
So these are the endpoints that are set up on our back end.
right?
Yeah, because all of the endpoints that we set up on our front end, they're being handled separately because I'm using hash router. So by
Gotcha.
utilizing hash router, I can specify my endpoints whatever way I want them, and they'll only touch my front end.
Okay, and that was the difference between using browser router, where they were conflicting with those calls yesterday. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, everything's finally coming together. Shoot, is the doing it well bit actually required? Yeah, I think that's the most important part. Before any of this that we have to, okay, perfect. Any other questions? Okay, great. In that case, the time is 10:51. Let's come back at 11 to try to use the rest of our miscellaneous things for the day, and then try to get assessment 4 shot out for everyone a little early and give you guys some time. You need more than 10 minutes. Does 15 work? Okay, let's do 15 minutes then.